Good morning. I hear last week that Tony had some problems when he started at the service. Some of you were here, some of you weren't, but I heard that he brought this thing down and his pages fell all over, and then he hit his head on here and was having problems. I hope I can do a little better today. We'll see how it goes. I've been attending New Heights for over 10 years. I lead a women's group on Wednesdays during Family Faith Night, and I also attend the Saturday morning women's Bible study. I have found that being in a small group really helps me feel like I belong. I get to know the women more intimately, and we get to share life. We laugh together, we cry together, and we pray together. And a good example of that was yesterday morning when our Saturday morning group met. We all prayed together. They prayed over me for today as I share my story. And also my Wednesday night group has been praying for me as I get ready to share my story. And that's just such a wonderful feeling to know people are praying over you and for you. I am sharing my story today because, as Max Lucado once said, my mess can become his message. I grew up in Minnesota with my parents and two younger brothers. We went to a Lutheran church, and we were all very actively involved. We were always there every Sunday for any special services and for any activities. After my graduation from high school, I attended school for practical nursing. I started working as an LPN at the Mayo Clinic system in Rochester, Minnesota. It's there that I met my husband, Al. Excuse me. He had been sick most of his childhood, and the local medical system was unable to give him a diagnosis. His parents finally took him to Rochester, and he was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. He was about 15, 16 at that time. And now, with me meeting him, he was back after graduating from high school to have major surgery done. He was told by the doctors that if he didn't have the surgery, the ulcerative colitis would kill him. I was so impressed with his positive attitude. I guess he knew he had to accept it or die. I think his faith in God also helped him as he grew up attending a church in Arena. His surgery was successful, and after a couple of weeks, the doctors wanted him to go out on daily trips just to see how he would do away from the hospital before he was released. He asked me out on a date, and thus began our relationship. We dated for a year, and then we were married. I moved to Madison to start our new life. The first years of our marriage were not good. We had fights over religious beliefs. Our spiritual lives were weak, and we didn't actively participate in church very much. All of our friends we had were drinkers and partiers, and we joined right in. There was unfaithfulness on both sides. Al, because he felt he had missed out on so much from being so sick his entire life, his childhood and his adolescent years. Me, because I got to the point I didn't care anymore, and I wanted to get back at Al. I thought about leaving the relationship more than once, but I felt I did not want to shame my family, and I also wanted to keep those vows that I had made before God, Al, and my family and friends. I wasn't someone who just gave up. I wanted to honor God with my life and my decisions I had made. After all, God knew what I was doing, and he knew what I was thinking. I was ashamed. I remember getting down on my knees one night by my bed and asking God for forgiveness for all the stuff I had done. I vowed to work on my marriage and be faithful to Al. I was tired of the life I had been living. After we had been married about 9 years and no children yet, I decided maybe children would help our relationship. We went through fertility testing, and I eventually found out that I couldn't have children. I went through a period of grief, realizing I would never experience a pregnancy or a childbirth. We decided we would go through the adoption process. We went through LSS. Excuse me. We went through Lutheran Social Service in Madison. We started with a program for India, but that was stopped by their government shortly after we signed up. We went on the white infant list, which they said would be a long wait. We prepared for several years of waiting. Then we got a call in 1981 that they were starting a Korean program, and would we be interested? Of course we would be. We filled out all the paperwork, did the home study, the financial background check, and we had to even do FBI fingerprint checks. After all of this waiting, we received the referral of a little girl who was 4 years old. I was so disappointed. I had asked for an infant, and I really had my heart set on a baby. I talked to our social worker about it. She assured me that someone else would want her and give her a home. I felt guilty, and I also wondered if this would put us back at the bottom of the list again. Our social worker assured me we would not be moved down the list and not to feel guilty about not taking this little girl. In April of 1982, we received Danielle's picture in the mail and accepted her. The wait seemed to take forever, but in September of 1982, we went to O'Hare Airport to get her. Only one of us was allowed to go to the plane and wait for her to be brought off. Al allowed me to be the one to get her first. When she was brought off the plane and handed to me, she didn't even cry. It was like she knew I was her forever mom. Now we had a child, and I was very happy. Our social worker said that we could adopt again as soon as Danielle was legally ours, so that is what we proceeded to do. We received Ashley's referral in June of 1984. We once again made the trip to O'Hare in October of 1984. This time, Al went, and he waited for Ashley to be brought off the plane. He came walking up to us, and Ashley was snuggled down in his shoulder, sound asleep. Thus began our special father-daughter bond. Al had been an over-the-road trucker a few years before we adopted the girls, and he continued to drive truck for about 4 years after we had the girls. It was difficult being a single parent while Al was on the road. We also noticed some behavior problems with Danielle and began counseling sessions with her. When the girls were about 4 and 2 years old, Al quit trucking and started a job at Plastic Ingenuity in Cross Plains. I was so happy that we were finally together all the time. Our marriage relationship was also starting to improve. In 1993, Al accepted a supervisor position at Plastic Ingenuity in Arkansas. I also started working for Plastic Ingenuity when we moved down there. During our search for a church home, several people mentioned trying Fellowship Bible Church in West Little Rock. We loved it right away. It was a church that we both felt comfortable in. This church was huge, though, and in order to feel like you belonged, you needed to join and participate in a small group, and they called them community groups there. We joined a couples community group. We were the oldest couple, as the others all had babies or were pregnant, but it didn't matter. We still learned a lot and enjoyed getting to know them and sharing our lives together. After a couple of years, we joined a different couples community group. They were more our age, and we really became close with them. We went on several weekend retreats with them, and that is what really brought all of us closer together. At that time, Danielle continued to have behavior difficulties. We continued to have her see a counselor. It was wonderful to have our community group to talk to about this and pray for Danielle and for us. I felt comfortable talking to them about whatever was going on in my life. Our marriage was stable and we were happy. We had a good group of godly people in our lives. Then on October 24th, 1996, our world changed forever. Al and Ashley had left the night before to travel up to Wisconsin, as Al had planned in deer hunting, and Ashley wanted to go with to see family. They had left the evening before and planned to drive through the night to get there in the morning. I gave them hugs and told them I loved them before they left. They were gone maybe a half an hour, and Al came back as he'd forgotten his deer hunting license. When they came back, Danielle happened to come down, and she gave her dad a hug and told him she loved him. She said that she felt God telling her to come down and hug him and tell him that. About a week before this, she had been asked on a date, but Al had suggested that they go out to dinner and go out to a movie, so they had a date night. Danielle and I are both so glad that she has that memory of him. The next morning, I was getting ready for work when I got a phone call from a hospital in Bloomington, Illinois, asking permission to operate on Ashley as she'd been in an accident. I gave them my permission and then asked about Al. They said they didn't have information on him. They gave me the phone number to the hospital and said they would call me back shortly. I waited for what seemed like hours. In the meantime, I had called my boss at PI and explained about Ashley. He was at my house within 5 minutes waiting with me to hear about Al. I finally got tired of waiting, and I called the number I had written down on the paper. I got a wrong number, and I talked to a lady. I explained the situation to her, and she was kind enough to give me the correct number to the hospital. When I called the hospital with the correct number, the director of nursing informed me that Al had died in the accident. I just went numb. I could not cry. I hugged Danielle and told her what had happened. They had been in a car accident, and the car went into the median and rolled over several times. No other vehicle was involved. Someone saw the car in the ditch and called 911. The EMTs told me later that Ashley was awake when they got there, and she gave them my phone number to call and told them that I would be leaving for work shortly, so they better call soon. They said Al was killed instantly. All I remember after that was having a house full of people. My entire community group from church was at my house within minutes, along with my best friend from work. They were there crying with me, hugging me, praying for me. The owner of PI arranged to have the company plane fly us to Bloomington so we could be with Ashley. My friends from church and work packed my suitcase for me and assured me they would take care of the house and even the dog. One of the ministers from our church flew up with us to Bloomington. We landed and got to the hospital. We went straight up to Ashley's room as she was now out of surgery, and guess who was sitting with her? The woman I had called and gotten the wrong number. She decided that she would not go to work, but needed to be with this 12-year-old girl who had no family with her at the moment. God had provided a guardian angel for Ashley. They interviewed her for a newspaper article right after this happened, and she said she thought of having a little girl in the hospital far from home, and she just wanted to be there for her. She also checked in several times after we got there. From there, it was one provision after another that I later could see God providing. The EMTs came to the hospital to check on Ashley and brought her gifts. They said she was a very brave little girl. Then a farmer working out in his field heard about the accident and sent a stuffed animal up to Ashley. We don't even know who he was. The hospital staff were all so caring. I had to tell Ashley that her dad had died in the accident, and when I did, I saw a tear run down her swollen, bruised face. That was all she could do at the time. Ashley was able to get out of the hospital the next day, and we made the trip to Arena to plan a funeral. All of our church community group from Arkansas came up to Wisconsin for Al's funeral. One of them spoke at the funeral, and one was a pallbearer. Once again, they were there to give me hugs, prayers, and support me. Once everything was settled, we headed back to Arkansas. I was now a single mom to a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, and headed back to my home with none of my family close by. My community group became my family down there. They made us meals, they cleaned my house, They came over when I just needed someone to talk to or cry with. The first time we went back to church, I was so dreading it. But my entire community group came and sat with the girls and me. They continued to do that for several Sundays until I was able to sit with the girls and not cry continuously. The men's group gave us a large sum of money to help us out. One of the men in our church community group went with Danielle to collect leaves in the cold weather for a school assignment she had. Another one of the men in our community group went with Ashley to a father-daughter banquet. God was there working it all out. It was suggested I read through the Psalms, which really did help me. My verse that came out of reading the Psalms was Psalm 55:17. Evening, morning, and noon I cry out in distress, and he hears my voice. We had so much support those first few years. I cannot imagine going through this without all the support I had. Danielle's behavior was finally diagnosed as bipolar at about the age of 16 and was a very difficult time for all three of us. The church community group once again was there to support me. We moved back up to Arena in 2006 as I needed to be closer to family again. After a few months of living here and not liking the cold weather, Danielle moved to California and continued to struggle. I worried about her, and so many times I had to just hand her over to God and pray for her safety and her health. I'm happy to say she moved back here several years ago and married a wonderful man, Ken, who was a great support to her. She has so many times told me how glad she is for my support and God's love and protection over her. Mental illness is just that, an illness, but is so misunderstood in our society. Ashley continues to live with me and has a son, my grandson, Brian, whom I love dearly. He brings joy into my life and keeps me active and young at heart. So many trials in my life, and I can see now that God provided what I needed for each and every situation. He never promises that our lives will be easy and nothing bad will happen, but he does promise to be right there with us. I didn't always feel him there at the time, but he was always providing the people I needed at the time. They were all God with skin on. Life is still hard at times, but I know that God will provide what I need. It may not be what I think I need, but I know he knows what's best for me. My faith would never be this strong if I had not gone through all that I have been through. My verse I live by now is Philippians 4:11 through 13. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. We think we can do it ourselves, but one way that God strengthens us is by giving us each other. I am not a writer or a speaker, but I wanted to share my story in hopes that it will give someone else hope. Thank you for allowing me to share my story, and I would encourage you to write your story, even if you don't want to share it. I received so much healing during this process. I didn't realize how much anger I still had towards Al, and writing this story just changed it. I feel so much better now. Let me pray. Father, I just thank you for our faith community, for the love and concern that we receive from each other. I pray for anyone who may be feeling alone. May they find love and strength in the people that you place in their lives. Please help us to extend that love out into our community and the world. Help us to remember that you are always beside us, wherever we are and whatever we may be going through. I thank you for your unconditional love that allows us to make mistakes and always come back to you. In your name I pray, amen.